Are you ready to unlock the keys to achieving work-life balance while driving your business towards unprecedented growth? Well, I want you to join us as we sit down with the brilliant mind behind Business, Balance, and Bliss, Amy Vetter.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Well, Amy, welcome to the show. I was a featured guest on your show, so I appreciate you carving out time to be a guest, especially with Business, Balance, and Bliss. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your history and what that's all about?
Yeah, so a little background on myself. I am a CPA and a yogi, and I didn't come by being a yogi naturally. I came by being a CPA as it was in my family. My grandfather was a CPA, and my mom decided to not become a CPA and an art teacher. So from the time I was 12 years old, I was pretty much saying I was going to be a CPA, not that I actually knew what that meant. It was really over and over talked about that this was the path to go, as a safe and secure career. In tangent with that, I was a violin player. I was a painter. I was very creative. And when I was 16, my mom lost her businesses and we lost our house. We lost everything inside of our house. So I went back to CPA is a safe career. I'm going to be a CPA. And so that was the path I went, and I became partner in a CPA firm by the time I was 32, which was really my moment of shakeup. And what am I doing with my life? I never really looked right and left from the time I was 16, and definitely, gave my life to work, and really kind of had a breakdown as a new mom, and trying to keep up the career as a partner in a CPA firm. And I started on this path to yoga on accident, and through that it just started infiltrating into my life, and I started realizing how you incorporate these philosophies of mindfulness in the workplace, and truly setting these boundaries between your business, your career life, and your personal life, so that you can get the most out of both.
Well, for those of you listening, we're live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can enter comments below. And if you're listening on the replay or on the Business Growth Show podcast, you can find us on all your streaming platforms. So again, this is Amy Vetter, Vetter, and her website is Amy Vetter, same just like her name, Amy, Amy, Vetter. All right. Well, Amy, I hear a lot about this work-life balance, and we hear about the different generations: Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, the Alpha generation, the Boomers, blah blah blah. Right? So this work-life balance is, I would say some employees are intrinsically motivated. Other people are like, well, no, they're like, I live to work. Other people work to live. Right? And so there's this balance. And then I hear all these experts that say, well, there's no such thing as balance. You should just, put everything into it. I know you have a different perspective because, again, those of you who don't know, Amy also is a keynote speaker. She does training. She does strategic coaching with C-level executives. And that's who our audience is today. So for all of us overachievers or underachievers, yes, what is the real truth behind work-life balance? Like, what is it? I understand the words, but how do you balance it? Like, I want to work out more, but I find myself, I've got 500 emails I need to go through. So where does someone start?
You start from within. So, we all want the quick fix to, how we fix this. I actually call it work-life harmony rather than balance. And that is kind of incorporating some of my musical background into this. But harmonies shift, they go fast, they're loud, they're soft, they're slow, they're fast. And that's the way our days go, right? And so all the research on work-life balance is it's not about the quantity of time, it's the quality.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so the thing is, even if it's 2 minutes and we're able to release, recharge, get our energy back, and make sure that we're showing up intentionally and the day's not just coming at us throughout the day, then we're actually accomplishing work-life harmony. It doesn't have to be this prescriptive, like it must be before work or after work, or it can be throughout your day where you're recharging, just getting back to yourself so that you can show up not only better for yourself, but the people around you as well.
Well, I think that's really an important factor in organizations today, because culture is such a big thing. And a lot of my episodes, we've had experts on culture and leadership, and everybody has their different advice for it, because I think that you work by example, right? So I think the staff of your team emulates or what they think is expected by the owners. And so what do you do when you go into an organization that has high turnover, they have dysfunction, they're not really getting along, and you can immediately, because of your experience, see what the issues are? Where does the company start?
We start from leadership. And it's just like you said, if I don't see the example in my leaders, I'm not going to believe you, no matter what the marketing messaging says internally, externally,
or what the posters say on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. What your values are that everybody has to look up, if we're not actually talking about them every day and living them. So it's really important that we do that inner work as leaders, so that we uncover our own belief systems that are holding us back, our own patterns of behavior. And they might have served us at one point, but they no longer serve us today in the culture that we have today. And when you brought up the different generations, this comes up all of the time.
Right.
And it's one of those things that there are differences in generations, don't get me wrong. However, I believe that I wasn't that different from this generation. I just didn't know I could speak up. I could actually say, I'm not going to live my life like that. I always wanted to incorporate all my hobbies and not have to give them up, but I wasn't seeing that as an example or that it was even allowed. Now, in this world, the shift is that people are more aware that they don't want to live lives like that.
Right.
It's not that we wanted to, it's just what we ended up doing because that was the way the culture was at the time. But in order to shift the culture, we have to let go of some of those belief systems, and a lot of belief systems. And I hear this all the time from, C-level executives when we're in a private room, is like, this is just the way it goes. This is the way you work. This is the way it has to be. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. But the reason we say that a lot of times is because we don't want to have to actually do the work to shift it. Because it does take work, and it takes inner work to really believe in it. And then it takes work to bring everyone along with you. And you've got to be able to invest that time and care to making that change.
Okay, so first you have to identify that you want to make it better. We know it starts with the leadership, so they have to start from within, because I think that's a pretty common. What are some of the obstacles you find when you work with organizations? We'll go with the organizational aspect first, and then go to the individual aspect. But what are some of the obstacles that you run into? I know for me as a strategic coach and business advisor, and keynote speaker, of course, like we both are, what I find is a lot of times the leadership thinks they know what the problem is, and they're not necessarily open to the new ideas. So the first thing is I have to get them open-minded. So let's just assume they're open-minded, and now they're at that point where they're saying, okay, I know what I'm doing isn't working. Who's always at the scene of the crime with the issue? So it's the same thing. And so when you work with those high-level or C-level executives, what are some of the tools or the tactics or insights? Do you do box breathing? Do you have little sayings, or what are some of the tactical things that they can do to start shift? First, I know it starts within with the leadership, and then to integrate through the organization. Because before you answer that, which is a lot to unpack, and you can take this any direction you want. Okay, we're live. This is just a conversation. Yeah. What my question is, with staff, and I'm asking from experience, my challenge has always been, I'm a driver, so I want to drive results. So in the past, would always approach things through my lens. Hey, here's the North Star. Let's drive this. Let's go. And after working with experts like you and have people in my mentorship and partners, I've learned different ways of doing it. So that's really why I'm asking. So what do you tell people to do?
Well, I don't tell people to do anything. So
Yep.
this has to be created to.
Yeah, I use sound effects on your podcast. I'm going to use them on mine.
I love it. It's really about coming to an answer together, and how we get to the answer, which you'll love this answer for it, is data, not opinion. And so what comes up many times going into leadership meetings is everyone has decided what the answers are, what the problems are. And then it becomes this group think of this belief system that that's what's true. So it's just like if you were going to put out a new product or service line, you've got to product test it with your customers. You've got to actually find out, is this what they need, what they want? Is it solving a problem? And so forth. So really where I start is surveying the staff, is interviewing, doing live interviews, is getting real data so that when I'm faced with the groupthink, we have real data to compare it to. Because a lot of times what I hear from leadership is they just don't care, like I did about this. And I don't find that when I'm interviewing them. I don't find that they don't care. People typically do not take a job. And I'm not saying 100%. But most people, if they're going to dedicate their day to a job, want to produce something, want to show something for it. They care about the company. No one walks into a job to say, how am I going to mess this up today? So we've got to think about it from a different perspective of what is it that's really bothering them or where they feel their struggles are, so that we start with the most important things first and they're seeing that impact. And then you start working on the other things, but we don't start from opinion.
I think that's so wise. Do you have any specific assessments that you use, or is it your internal assessment?
Yeah, I do not use a specific assessment. I have my own questions
Right.
That I have found over time elicit what I need as far as a consultant and a coach to bring that out. And then I also will select a sampling from people that took the survey of all levels, all departments, to live interview them to get more color on that, have the conversations, not just the written word, because usually there's 3 more levels deep to whatever they put on that survey. And so really trying to understand that so that I can bring that all together and make a really good recommendation to the leadership team, and then allow them to decide, are they willing to make the investment? So I never try to sugarcoat what it means to make a shift, right? And so if you want an easy fix, if you want someone to just tell you what to do, I'm not the person, right? That you've got to be involved in the process. You've got to be showing that you're learning, because as leaders, sometimes we kind of take ourselves out of the learning process and say they need to do it. I just did a organization where the partner in the firm basically brought me in and said, I can't change the partners, so I want you to do this with all the managers, all the senior managers and directors. So, okay, we started that. And then what happened? As we were going through the program, the managers, the senior managers, the directors are like, well, are the partners going to go through this? And they got requested to come in the end. And then it just changed communication, right? Because everyone was on the same playing field. So everyone's really got to be lockstep in that belief system, else you create too much friction.
I would agree. And from a marketing perspective, it's very similar. You know, a lot of times a client will tell me what's working, what's not working, but it's a lot of it's opinion. And so data doesn't lie. I love that. And I love, for me, when I do a mystery shop, you do your SWOT analysis, and you interview their customers, you interview their vendors, you interview their team. And then you start to get the real picture, and there's always a disconnect between what leadership feels and what the team or customers feel from a marketing perspective. So from a culture perspective, or for work-life balance or bliss or harmony, I think it's really important that, our listeners realize that, start with the data, because that gives it substance, and you have to make sure you have buy-in. If you don't have buy-in through the entire organization, it's going to fail, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And I do from, all the work of mindfulness work is really trying to understand, sitting in that person's shoes, why they're saying what they're saying. And a lot of times what I find with leaders is they feel a majority of the time that they've put all these programs in place. They're trying to give the flexible schedules, they're doing, and it's just not being appreciated, right? And
Are you a fly on the wall in my office? Because I did freaking I can cuss. It's my own show. But I did lunch and learns. I did excursions. I did team building exercises. I got the book 1,001 Ways to Reward Your Employees. I went through all this, and I would say, shit, it's my show. And I was just like, I can't get this to work. And it wasn't until I worked with people like you and Mark Sanborn and a few other people, Don Yeager and leadership, where they started to show you it's not the tactic, it's also how it's implemented. I was implementing it. I was the guy who said, oh, that's the problem. Let's just throw a bunch of crap at it. I was doing all the assessments. We did DISC and we did culture index, but it wasn't until I really understood like what you're sharing with our listeners and our viewers today, that it really has to be, it's much more than the tool.
It's much more than the tool. And that's the hard work, right? Like, I always say, even about yoga, I've owned a number of studios, and I always find it interesting because people will walk in when there's not a class and kind of like peer around, like what goes on here.
Right.
And it really takes more courage to be by yourself on that yoga mat, alone with your mind, than going to CrossFit. Right. Like I will sign up for CrossFit tomorrow. I know what that means. I can stay busy. I can stay chaotic and just do this program, and it's going to give me results. When I have to actually like assess what's happening for me as a leader and as a person, and how I am at work, how I am in my personal life, what I want to shift. Those are the things that it's like these aha moments that it's not necessarily them. I always use the example, like when you're having a bad day and you come home and you complain about the grocery clerk and someone cutting you off and this or that. And then by the end of the day, you're like, wait, I was the common denominator today.
Right. Yes. I always say, like, who's always at the scene of the crime, right? What's the one factor that's consistent?
So like, where can we like see where that's showing up? So that we can just do little shifts. A lot of this isn't big stuff, right? Like it's these little shifts that we put into place in our own interactions, how we listen, how we communicate, how we understand what others are going through. Because a lot of times we forget what it's like to be a staff person when you're the leader, because it was a long time ago and what those pressures were. And so it's important this is really how we bring mindfulness into the process of leadership, of how am I better able to understand and interpret what's happening and be able to create the results that I want for my team and my business.
Well, I think this has just been a great episode. And so last question before we wrap up, what's one key takeaway or piece of advice that you believe is really crucial for our listeners to remember as they embark on this new journey to create harmony in not only their business world and their personal lives?
I think what's important to take away is that our energy is contagious. And so when we are better able to regulate ourselves and have a better understanding and observation of ourselves, not judgment, we not only show up better and feel better for ourselves, but we show up better for the people around us.
Well, I know that that's so true, because I've jumped on morning Zoom calls with my team, and let's just say I was frustrated or something, and all of a sudden there's this tension, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, well, you're pissed off. I'm like, no, I'm not. And so it's 10, and I'm like, oh, okay. I was the grenade. I pulled the pin, or I was the catalyst. We'll be a little bit more politically correct. I was the catalyst that caused that. Well, I really appreciate you carving out time today in your busy schedule. For those of you, this has been Ford and Amy Vetter. You can check her out online, connect with her on LinkedIn, or check out her services. If you've got a culture or an organization that you want to improve the culture, to engage your staff, to retain them, by offering a program that's unique and different, I highly recommend that you check her out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.